My name is Willy Bolander. I study influence, persuasion, and leadership in selling and sales management, and I teach people how to sell. In this podcast, we'll talk to some of the world's top sales leaders and see what we can learn from them. Welcome to the Sales Lab. Every year in November, Florida State University hosts a massive event in Orlando, Florida. For business students, this is a sales role play and case competition, an opportunity to compete and get exposed to job opportunities with some of the world's best sales organizations. For companies, this is an unbelievable recruitment opportunity, bringing several hundred of the nation's best students, all already interested in starting their careers in sales, into one location for you to meet. So if you're a student looking to differentiate yourself and secure your dream job in sales, a marketing or sales professor looking to show off your students and connect them with great opportunities, or a sales manager or recruiter looking to acquire top sales talent, come learn more about the International Collegiate Sales Competition at www.icsc-fsu.com. That's www.icsc-fsu.com. Hey everybody, welcome to part one of my conversation with Adam Rubenstein from Traq.ai. Adam's an interesting fellow, serial entrepreneur, worked on a number of technology-related projects in different industries, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his entrepreneurial journey and what he's currently doing using AI and machine learning to try to gain visibility into sales rep interactions. Talk a little bit about how the sales conversation is the data. And that's what we need to be looking at. We need metrics beyond just the things that we're able to report in a CRM system. So this will be part one of a three-part series. Hope you guys enjoy it. It's a good kickoff for season 2. What excited me about having you for this interview was, you're not just a salesperson. I mean, you are a salesperson, but I would maybe describe you as a serial entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
You build a company and then you wander away, and you build a new company and then you wander away. And I mentioned this to you earlier, but I kind of have a special place in my heart for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. I think obviously the most important thing anybody could ever become would be a business professor with a podcast. But then entrepreneurs would be like a very close second in my mind.
Well, I would agree with you. In fact, sometimes I think that I'd like to be a professor. I have a lot in my head and a lot that I'd like to share with people. And I'm a little bit pedantic anyway. So the idea of, working at the local university and being a professor of entrepreneurship, it's actually something I'd really love to do someday in the future.
Yeah, it's there, that's an option. There's more and more sales programs and more entrepreneurship programs. And
right.
We actually at Florida State, we have kind of large programs for both of those areas.
Right.
But so let's lay some groundwork real quick. So right now you are growing a company called Traq.ai.
Correct.
Walk us through, in your words, a little bit, what is happening with that? Why is that needed and what does it do?
As you mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is the fourth company that I started after grad school. The first 3 companies, basically, we invented something. We quickly learned that it's not a field of dreams. Build it and they do not come. Somebody has to sell it. I think my partner and I flipped a coin, and I don't know if I would consider I won or I lost, but I ended up getting the sales job, either both starting as a salesperson and then leading the sales team. And I was always frustrated because I didn't really know what was going on among my salespeople. They're out there selling. Periodically, deals would come in. And I didn't really know what to expect. I'd be asked by my partner, how are we doing? Are we going to meet our numbers for this quarter? I'd walk around the room, talk to all the salespeople. I'd get their information, their insights on each deal. I'd put together a forecast, and invariably we would miss it by a lot. And I thought, how do I solve this? Now, one way would be for me to sit in on every call, and that's not physically possible when you have, anything more than 3 salespeople. If you got 25 and they're making calls all day, that's not possible to listen in. So I wanted to solve the problem. I actually wanted to solve 2 problems. I was always frustrated that the salespeople did not put adequate notes into the CRM. And when I say adequate by my measure, not necessarily theirs. And part of that is we were asking too much of them, right? They're expected to present a PowerPoint and build rapport and listen actively, ask good questions, navigate the sales conversation, and, by the way, take good notes. It's a lot to ask to be really engaged as a salesperson, to really listen. It's hard to take notes and do that. So I said, how do we solve for that? And secondly, how do we give me as a sales leader visibility into the deal so that I can help them? If they're struggling in a certain area, I need to see where they're struggling. If there's a strategy issue that I could help with, I need to see that. I found that during my pipeline review, I'd sit down with the sales team maybe every Monday afternoon, go through their pipeline, and often I'd hear, well, they don't like our price. And I found that price objections are often the easy excuse for something else, that there was something else going on behind the scenes that they had not picked up on because they're, trying to take notes and do all these other things. But if you were to listen to the conversation independently, you could hear what's going on and find out that maybe it's not a price issue, but maybe their job security is at stake. They think that our company coming in and selling them something means that they're going to lose their job. And once you understand that, you can address it, but you have to know all the issues and all the objections. And I never had that visibility until we designed Traq 365.
Indeed, yeah. So Traq 365 is basically taking advantage of the fact that a lot of things have migrated onto. When I say things, I mean sales calls have migrated onto some kind of virtual platform, not so face to face, and therefore it's really easy to record it. Correct. And so you guys developed a system that goes through these recordings and looks for certain keywords and cues, and we'll maybe not get too in the weeds of exactly how that happens, but uses some, would you call it AI or machine learning or all of that, or?
Right. Well, so AI is the umbrella term. Machine learning is a method, and we're using natural language processing to be more specific. We're taking conversation and analyzing it, and that's the NLP part of it. Natural language processing is what that stands for. And these three things, AI, ML, and NLP, are combined to allow us to analyze a conversation, mine it for insights and actionable intelligence. We can look for specific words, but we also can look for meaning. And that's the beauty of machine learning and AI. I can say to you, the price is too high. It's obvious the price is too high. But AI would pick up, you're too much for us, or I don't have the budget. And both of those would fall into the category of your pricing issue, because it understands the meaning of those words and it can correlate the meaning, it's too much for me, to the price is too high. And so you don't have to give it every possible sentence that somebody could say for it to figure out what the person is saying. That's the beauty of the machine learning and AI. But we're also doing more than that. We're trying to, of course, record the conversation and transcribe it so that you can listen to it, you can read it. Then we use AI to summarize it. And the summary allows me as a sales leader or the salesperson to review their conversation in a few minutes that might have lasted an hour. This is really helpful. I used to have the problem, I would have a call and then it would be 6 weeks until I'd have the next call. And I always felt silly because I didn't really remember what happened 6 weeks ago, so I was almost starting from scratch. And I wanted to solve for that. So I thought, well, if I can read a summary, get up to speed quickly, I can sound like I actually remember the conversation from 6 weeks ago. And Absolutely. So that was a real benefit. The sales leaders can read the conversation, understand what happened in the meeting without having to listen for an hour. We also give a sentiment score. I want to understand, was the buyer leaning in or not? Were they engaged? Did they sound positive? Were they, encouraging? We also do what we call a Traq score. So I score the conversations, because all too often the salespeople would come to me and I'd ask how the call would went. And, salespeople are optimistic, and they have to be, otherwise it'd be a very difficult job. But their optimism often lends them to being overly optimistic about the likelihood of the deal closing. And we wanted to give a much more objective measure. So we're using artificial intelligence combined with some other statistics to score the call so I can know whether the call went well. And then finally, mining the conversation so that we understand what were the issues that the buyer had, what were their objections, what are the risks to the deal, anything that could hinder or hamper the deal, what were the feature requests, what were the opportunities that we discussed. So I kind of capture all that so that I have in a database. One of the things that would happen to me in my last company, I would come to the head of development, I'd say, I think we need this feature. And their first question is, well, why do you think that? And I'd say, well, I've been hearing it a lot. And the problem was that was too anecdotal. They wanted data. Well, with Traq 365, and you've got hundreds of conversations recorded, you can actually say, well, we've had 250 conversations, and in 112 of them, the buyer said they wanted this feature. So I have 112, bits of evidence that say this is something we should consider building. And so that was something I think is really helpful. Also, when you have certain questions the buyer's asking, they don't understand your approach, your technology, And you go to the marketing department and you share that with them. They're like, wait, we talk about that on the website. Well, clearly not good enough, because I would not be getting this question over and over if our messaging was done well. So let's visit that. So there's so many things kind of buried in the conversation that can be helpful to so many departments in the company, not just sales, but I'm in sales. I know sales, so my target focus, is sales at this time. But I can see it being beneficial to a lot of other departments.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of taking notes over here and trying to make sure I can keep my thoughts organized as we proceed. But I went to a doctor's appointment last week, and long story short, several of my kids got interested in skateboarding. So I took that as an excuse to go skateboarding with them, and did some significant damage to my physical being as a result. But it's all good. It's all good. But this was just kind of a checkup to make sure everything was still good, and it's still good. But they actually had kind of a Google Home, Alexa looking device sitting on the counter. I think its name was Robbie. I'm not 100% sure about that. And it was there to facilitate the transcription of our interaction, which of course is huge in medical, right?
Right.
And it was I tried talking to it. It didn't, when they left, I tried having a conversation with it. It didn't want to talk back to me. But every now and then they say, okay, Robbie, we're looking at X-ray, read off some numbers or something, and, doing this, and giving it cues to pay special attention to certain bits of information. And that was actually, I didn't think about this when we spoke last week, but that was the day before you and I had our first phone conversation. I was like, wait, how did I not bring up that I just had this weird AI robot interaction at the doctor's office? But yeah, other industries are using this. Other fields are using this. It's kind of striking me as interesting that, we've been recording service interactions for a few decades now. How much more important are our sales interactions? And we still have just such limited variability. And this goes back hundreds of years. I mean, it used to be zero visibility. Our visibility is at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. You either brought us some contracts or you didn't. And it's gotten a little bit better than since then, but not a lot.
It's come a long way, but since that time when you had no visibility, now we started using the metrics, activity metrics. I know how many calls people made and how many emails they sent, how many appointments they set, how many times people visited our website, how many times they opened an email. And those are activity based, and we're trying to use them to show intent. And they do to some degree, but it's really secondary or tertiary data. The real intent is, I think, comes from what the buyer says. And even they are not necessarily going to give you perfect intent, because they're going to want to negotiate. They're probably talking to other vendors, but it's better than saying that, they opened an email 4 times, they must want to buy.
Yeah.
So we have that visibility, but, capturing the conversation, and, imagine that a buyer, we learn over many conversations that buyers say things like, I'm pretty interested. And you find out that I'm pretty interested in 101 conversations out of 150 means I'm buying. Mm-hmm. Well, they don't have to say, oh yeah, I'm buying. They don't have to be that, energetic. They can just say something subtle, but we might find that that's the phrase, and I'm making this up. That's the phrase that clues us in. Yeah. Right. Those are the great words. But there's so many of those things that are happening in these conversations that you can pick up, you start seeing what are the nuances, what are the subtleties within the conversation that are going to give us some insight, and we can start, calculating. And at some point, we're going to be able to give a very, good score on this call is an 88% chance of leading to a close, because we have converted all the conversation to data. We have enough data points to, statistically determine that, that's how strong the call went. And it's a statistical number. It's, 88%. It's not 100%, but it's certainly better than 50%. And with enough data, we're going to get to the point where these type of analyses are going to be, 90+% accurate all the time. And you had mentioned the likelihood of recording, in the doctor's office. I think they started it because nobody could read a doctor's handwriting.
Probably, yeah.
Right. So they started recording them as confirmation. And all of our calls, when you call customer service, are being recorded. I believe, I'm going to step back. If you remember the day 15 years ago, you'd go to Blockbuster Friday night, pick up a tape. And then a few years later, we started getting CDs in the mail. And now we're streaming all of our movies and TV online. But back then in 2005 to 2010, the idea that we'd be streaming movies, that was, mind blowing. Nobody thought that was going to happen. Well, things are moving more quickly now. I think that sales recording or recording of sales conversations, while it is not everybody is doing it, I think in the next year or two, everyone will be doing it, because once everyone realizes how much data is embedded in those conversations and how, when mined, it's going to lead to better decisions across the board, that in 2 years from now, I think it's going to be routine. Everyone is going to record every sales conversation. We're going to be mining them. And we're going to make a big leap in our sales ability, sales skills, our ability to predict sales, revenue projections. All that is just going to take a big leap forward and be data-centric and data-driven and much more accurate.
Absolutely. Well, another thing that strikes me is there's a common perception that going to a virtual selling method, doing more work over the phone or through the video chats on the computer, is a loss of what we might call the richness of the context, right? That, like you'd mentioned a moment ago, the word like leaning, okay, verbally, are they leaning in? Well, okay, we're not face to face. We're not sharing that space and sharing that air as frequently. And yeah, there are certain things that maybe we aren't going to be able to observe, right? We don't see them tapping their fingers on the desk or, uncomfortably jiggling their leg or whatever it may be. But I think part of what you're doing is kind of flipping that on its head, right? It's saying, you're going to lose certain things, but we're capturing so much more information that maybe we can tease some of that out, right? Again, back to leaning in. Okay, maybe we don't know if you're really leaning in physically, but we're going to be able to find these cues, these sort of indicators that say, okay, this person is doing something that 90% of the people who do end up buying from us within the next quarter or whatever, right? And it's actually kind of hard to talk about this in a generalized way, examples. But that's pretty great, right? I mean, this is at the end of the day going to be better than being able to pat each other on the back and observe the lean in or the lean out or whatever. Right. I mean, this is permanent and ready to be analyzed and all sorts of good things.
Well, I think that we've lost some in that we're not in-person meetings. There's something special about in-person meetings, but also in-person meetings are very inefficient from a time perspective. And, both, I don't want to fly across the country and spend 2 days flying for a 1 hour meeting if I can avoid it. And the person who is on the other end, they're like, okay, well, if this guy shows up, I've got to greet him and I've got to spend time with him. And I might have to go to lunch with him. So there's an efficiency aspect to it. For most of these calls, I can see the person. So I do get a lot of the benefit of the visual side of it. So I guess we're losing a little bit of that heartfelt connection. I can't pat you on the shoulder or shake hands with you, but I'm getting a lot more data. It's a lot more efficient. The other thing, and that's I don't think that'll ever go back. We will still have in-person meetings, but it may be less so because of the efficiency of this online meeting. I used to tell my team, a deal of a certain size, we're going to fly out and we take two people, because one person is a salesman, two is a company. And so we'd go out as teams of two people and we would show that a certain level of, care, concern, importance to that meeting. But it's really expensive to do that.
Yep.
I think the fact that we have these Zoom meetings everyone's used to it. It's become very comfortable, and it allows us to have a lot more meetings. People can take a meeting when they might not have wanted to fly across the country or have someone fly to visit them. So there's a lot of data to be captured. And in fact, the data capture is so much easier on these meetings. I always say that to some degree, we're in a perfect storm for what we're doing at Traq 365. Computers are cheap, especially in the cloud right now. The Zoom meetings or GoToMeeting or Teams or Meet are all really popular. And AI has made such leaps and bounds, advancements in the past 18 months that allow us to analyze conversations. The other thing that has happened is sales calls themselves are I'll call them more intense and more important, but fewer. Mm-hmm. Most buyers have done so much research prior to the sales call. They know so much more that the meeting is really kind of intensified. They don't, in the old days, and I go back, 20 years ago, I'd talk to you, get to know you, I'd want to understand a little bit about your company, and then there'd be another call about what our technology can do and another call about how we're going to solve the problem, and you'd want to learn a lot about what we're doing and how we do it. You know a lot of that already. You've shared that, read about it. So now the call that I do have with you, I got to get it right. If I don't cover the right material, if I don't do a good job of covering it and pulling out from you what things matter to you, I may not win this deal over a single call. So that call really matters. And if I were to go revisit it and I find out that, oh my gosh, I completely neglected to discuss this topic, okay, I'll get you on the phone. I'll send you an email and say, look, we just need 10 more minutes. I just want to share something important. But I now actually know what I neglected to talk about. I can go back and kind of fix the problem. But each call is more valuable and more important today than it was in the past.
I believe it. We're going to stop it right there for now. Please dive into the next episode of the Sales Lab to hear the conclusion of this interview. And by the way, if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe and to rate this podcast on whatever app you use to listen. Also, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's continue to have a deeper discussion on all things related to selling and sales leadership. See you next time in the Sales Lab.